Hey, how you doing? Justin here. Today we're going to check out an alternate fingering for your A chord where we just use the first finger. It's going to be a mini bar. It's going to hold down 3 strings and mute one. I found it a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I know students that pick it up real super quick, so you might be one of those lucky people who play it and go, oh man, this is so much easier for me to play an A chord than that other one where the fingers are all cramped together. Or you might be like me and be like, well, the other one's kind of easier most of the time for me. Give it a go and see. Do give it a bit of practice as well, because you might find it's real super difficult for a few days and then it gets easy. So I wouldn't just wipe it off if you struggle the first few days. Let's get enough talking. Let's just play this thing. So here's our A mini bar. We're not going to play the thickest string. It's an A chord. We want the A to be the lowest root note, the open 5th string. First finger is holding down the 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string. Now the thinner string, some people have a joint, this first finger joint here is just the right length to be able to kind of lift up and get the open thinner string. So this one's ringing out open. Now, I don't like the sound of that most of the time, so I would choose nearly all the time to mute the thinner string. So I've got to lift my first finger up just a bit. Now, looking at the camera angle here from the front, it's not very clear about the angle of the first finger. And I should also point out that these other fingers would rarely be tucked away like that. I'm kind of doing that so you can see clearly the first finger. But when I play that normally, it would look more like this. But that looks a little confusing to have all of these fingers hovering around. But they're just sort of sitting above the strings. Okay, now I'm going to give you Justin's special overhead cam now. Here we go. Got a lot of good feedback about overhead cam before, so let's get that rocking again. So there's the chord. Now you can see there, this is the knuckle that needs to come forward to be able to release that thinner string. Okay, either to mute it, like if I go like this with the finger flat down, I'm going to be playing the thinner string. So I need to move that knuckle forward a bit to mute it, and if I want it to be open, it's got to move right further forward. You can see there again the finger position for the rest of the fingers. The normal way of playing it would look like that. So the fingers would be not touching the strings, of course, but just back a bit. They'd just be hanging around. They're not going to be doing this. Okay, if they're tucked away like that, that might be kind of, it's nice and clear when I'm teaching, but that would be what it would look like when I'm playing it for real. The fingers are just hanging around at the top. Now, one thing you might notice when you see me playing an A chord this way is that the thumb sometimes sneaks over the top and mutes the thicker strings. Now, it's something we're going to talk a little bit more about in the course, but if you find your thumb sneaking over there and muting that thicker string, it's kind of okay at this point. The whole idea of keeping the thumb at the back of the guitar neck was to make sure that you strengthen the muscle between your thumb and first finger to help you get to grips with the F chord. Oh, that was a good pun, wasn't it? Getting to grips with the F chord. That was the point of that. But now that we're actually playing the F chord, it's kind of okay if thumb wants to sneak around a bit more. We're going to talk about the thumb position and deliberately using it to mute strings a little later in the course. But if you happen to find that, particularly with this A chord, just because of the fingering, sometimes you might find that you want to grab it a little bit more with your hand. You don't want the thumb to be stuck around the back. It wants to be a little bit more over. The danger of that is it might pull the knuckle around. So when you go from here, you can get that knuckle nice and far forward. This one here, you can get that knuckle further forward to mute the string. And when you grab the thumb over, it kind of pulls it around. So I wouldn't be focusing on trying to do it, but if you happen to find, again, of course, these fingers are more likely to be just hanging around like that, you might find that the thumb wants to reach over and mute the thicker string, and that's okay. What you want to avoid, the one thing that you really want to watch out for is playing the 2nd string here. Okay, it's kind of a cool chord. It's called an A6 chord, and it's great if you're doing as an ending, that kind of thing. It's kind of cool, but it's not the sound that you want most of the time when you're playing an A chord. And I think most of the time you don't want to hear that thinner string. It just sounds, the chord to me sounds better without the 5th at the top. The 5th is the scale degree. You'll get into that if you start learning about your music theory. But I just think that note, it's not necessary in the A chord. Even when I'm playing an A chord with that, I'll often mute that thinner string with the edge of my 3rd finger there. I'll just let the 3rd finger lay a bit flatter to deliberately not have that note, because it's like the G chord, that low note in the G chord. I'm like, just the sound of it isn't so hot for me. Now, when it comes to practicing this one, There's lots of times that you might think that this chord would be more cumbersome. For example, if we're doing something that's going E, A, D, A, that kind of chord sequence, you've been doing all your practice with the anchor finger, so using this fingering is going to feel a lot easier probably. But I do find that this one, even though it's more movement, here, like going from the D, the first finger, it is kind of easier to go A to D, because first finger doesn't have a lot to do compared to this, where all of the fingers have got to jump around a bit. To the E chord, again, you'd think that should be easier, right? It kind of looks like it's less movement. But there are times where this mini bar chord A just feels so much better to use than the other fingering of the A chord. Probably 9 times out of 10, if I'm playing an open A chord, I'm going to be using that mini bar one, right? So it is really useful. It's one that I didn't get to grips with for quite some time. I played the regular A. Actually, I played it with the fingers all in a line, which I don't think is a great way of playing A, but I played that for the first 5 or 10 years that I played guitar, and I didn't really get into the mini bar thing until I'd already conquered most of the rest of the bar chords. It's worth working on. Find the songs where it feels good and have a go at inserting it in there. Even the one that Nitsudge was working on was Dance the Night Away, just going D to A for the whole song and experimenting with using that little mini bar. It's a nice way to kind of judge for you where it might feel comfortable, because it's only got those 2 chords. I think D to A using the mini bar is quite a nice change to work on. So have a bit of a go. See how it works. Avoid doing the full bar, because that just sounds weird. You can choose to either mute the string, or if you want to experiment with putting the bar right up and getting that thinner string, like I said, for my ears, it's not the best choice, but experiment. See what feels good for you and what sounds good for you, because we're all different. We all like different things, and some of this is, about making choices and, finding the chord grips and the ones that feel comfortable and sound good to you. That sort of stuff's pretty important too. So when it comes time to practice it, start by learning to just be able to play the chord and get the finger in the right place, and work on the positioning of the first finger to either mute or let ring that thinner string. Once you've got that, find a chord change to work, either D to A or E to A, some chord change, and then work on doing the chord change to it. You might even want to try playing a weak-fingered G chord to this A chord. That's also a nice change to work on. G and A chords commonly paired together as well. So find the ones that feel good for you and practice it.